Hey, how's it going? Today I just want to talk about exporting in Premiere Pro. I'm going to be talking about 3 important tips to keep in mind when you're exporting, and all 3 of these tips are based off mistakes that I've made in the past, and that has resulted in my exports coming out looking completely different to what I'd made them look like in Premiere Pro, which kind of sucks. So I thought I'd make this video to hopefully help all of you avoid making the same mistakes that I have in the past. And if you look right here on your right, these are the different tips that I'll be going over and the time codes. So if you want to skip ahead to any of them, feel free to do that. Okay, cool. Now let's get straight into it. Firstly, have you ever noticed this weird banding on some of your videos, especially in the high motion parts? It looks something like this and it just doesn't really look good. But fortunately, there's an easy fix to this, and it's in your sequence settings. So on the top bar, click on sequence. And then the first drop down just below it, you'll see sequence settings. So click on that. And then the important thing to look at is your field settings. For some reason, by default, it's set to lower fields first. And usually when you export a sequence, while it's set at lower fields first, you'll get that annoying banding. So anyways, just click on it and change it to no fields. Now when you export your video, it'll look beautiful again. Okay, cool. Secondly, let's move on to the Premiere Color Compensation Lut. Have you ever noticed that when you export your project, the colors look so much more washed out in your export compared to what you've made them look like in Premiere? Basically what happens is the shadows are raised, which is super annoying because all the work that you've put into your color grade just doesn't shine through anymore. And the scientific reason for this is Premiere displays video based on the assumption that your footage was recorded in Gamma 2.4 and displayed on a Rec 709 color space, which is not really important to know. But our apps on our computer, like QuickTime, or web browsers like Safari and Chrome, display video in a Gamma 1.96 profile. So it's that difference in the Gamma profile that's causing the colors to look so different. But fortunately, someone at Adobe created a conversion LUT, and all we have to do is apply it to our project when we're exporting, and when we look at the video in our export, it'll look just the way we made it in Premiere. It's called the QT Compensation LUT, or as I like to call it, the QT Compensation LUT. But anyways, I'll link it down below, so make sure you download that. Okay, now let's get into how you actually use it. Okay, so the first thing you need to make sure is that your preferences are in order. So on the top bar, click on Premiere Pro, and then scroll down to where it says Preferences, and then click on General. And in the General box, you'll see an option for Display Color Management. You have to make sure that that is checked. And you'll immediately notice that your footage gets a little bit darker. Then you can continue making edits to your product if you like. So after your product is finished and you start to export your sequence, make sure to navigate over to the Effects tab in your export settings and check this box next to Lumetri Look/LUT. You'll then be able to click this box here and scroll up to where it says Select. So you can browse your files and select the QT Compensation LUT that you've downloaded from wherever you've saved it to. After you've selected it, it'll still say None, but you can tell that it's been applied because your video preview will have gotten a lot darker. If you want to double check that it's been applied, just toggle this check mark on and off and you'll notice it goes from light to dark. Also, it'll look a lot darker here than what your actual grade looks like, but don't worry about that. After it's exported, it'll look just the way you want it to. Now with that applied, your export will have all the correct colors. Okay, now let's move on to the third one, the bitrate. So when you're in the export settings, you've made sure that your file is exported at H.264, that you're exporting at the proper resolution that you want to, and you may think that your work in the export settings is done. But there's one vital setting that a lot of people miss, and that is the bitrate. Okay, so firstly, what is a bitrate? Or what is a bit? Well, firstly, a bit is the smallest unit of data that a computer can process and store. And a bitrate is the number of bits that are transmitted per second to an output. So basically, all you need to know is the higher the bitrate, the higher quality video you're going to get. Okay, now that you've kind of understood that, let's get into what settings you need to use. Firstly, you have this option to switch between VBR and CBR. VBR stands for variable bitrate, whereas CBR stands for constant bitrate. People recommend using VBR for uploading to YouTube and CBR for things like streaming. And since I'm assuming that most of you are not as interested in streaming and more interested in actually exporting for the web, we're gonna go over how VBR works. Adobe recommends using VBR 1-pass, whereas most of the other sources that I've researched recommends using VBR 2-pass. And personally, I think I'd recommend using VBR 2-pass as well. The reason for this is in VBR 2-pass, the first pass actually analyzes the video and searches for areas of high or low motion or complexity so that it knows ahead of time which parts of the video to assign a higher bitrate to, which just makes it a whole lot more precise when deciding which parts of the video need a higher bitrate. VBR 1-pass would just kind of encode everything on the fly and you wouldn't get as precise an export. And although it will be quite a lot slower doing the 2-pass method, I think it's definitely worth it, as all you have to do is let your computer do the work. It's definitely worth it to get a little bit of a higher quality export, in my opinion. So when you choose VBR, you have these two sliders, the target bitrate and the maximum bitrate. So what are these? Target bitrate is what you want the average bitrate to be throughout your entire export. And maximum bitrate is the highest Premiere will take your bitrate on those portions of the video with high motion or high complexity. So your video or your export will likely peak at the maximum bitrate that you set. And you might think just jack the bitrate up all the way and get the highest quality video possible, which is what I thought at the very beginning too. But exporting is not only about quality, it's about finding a balance between quality and playability. So you don't want to go too high on either one, you want to strike a happy medium, find the perfect balance. And thankfully online, there are a bunch of recommendations specific for uploading to YouTube, or I guess uploading to the web in general, so I'll link that down below. But for now, let's go over what settings you need to use for if you're exporting at a standard frame rate. So anything from 24, 25, or 30 frames per second. So if you're exporting at 1080p, your bitrate should be 10 megabytes per second. So to set the target bitrate to 10, and then the maximum bitrate to 20. In general, it's always a good idea to set your maximum bitrate to double your target bitrate. Continuing on, if you're exporting at 1440p, set the bitrate to 20. So that means your max bitrate will be double that, which is 40. And finally, if you're exporting in 4K or 2160p, your target bitrate should be between 44 and 56. So your maximum bitrate should be between 88 and 112. Cool, now that everything's in order, hit export and you'll have a very precise, accurate, and good looking export. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please hit the like button. I would really appreciate that. Also leave a comment. Let me know if you like these tutorials, if you want to see more of them, and also hit subscribe too. That'll be awesome. And I'll see you in the next video.